Go right ahead.
that, since I've been the quiet one,
I think I was racing you pretty closely there.
you're not advocating with number 2 increasing over the current schedule. It's maintaining the current schedule. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. I guess what I'd say is a lot depends on your definition of additional revenues.
Right.
And
Well, yeah.
so, you know, I certainly think we're going to be mindful of that.
The reason I ask is because if it's, geez, we can do an advance payment or increase at the risk of not providing a service, then I would agree with my colleagues. If it's not meeting the schedules in order to provide a service, then I'm going to disagree with my colleagues. Let's backtrack here to the pension obligation, or the teeter discussion we just had a few minutes ago. One colleague saying, and this was on my watch earlier, and we can't use debt payment funds for operating expenses, and this gets our tail deeper in a bind here, and we can't keep doing that. So as long as this is maintaining the schedule,
Yeah,
then
and
yes.
that's the debt
If it's
reduction policy.
advancing that schedule above and beyond, then no, not when it's at the risk of other services.
Well
Th-
put. Well
That that's understood here, and
So you should let me go first.
so.
Cool.
And again, these are guidelines as we go into it, but we're saying meet all the schedules kind of up front and then go forward with the rest.
My colleague.
And I've talked too much today, and I apologize
Oh,
for
no,
that.
yeah, John, keep going.
But frankly, I love talking about the budget and what's going to happen.
You're a
It's-
sick man.
That's one of the main reasons. That's one of the main reasons I run for the job.
Michael here.
The reason I bring that up because I think there are areas for instance, I mean, and our CEO just made a comment on it. There's going to be some changes in our court, and it's my opinion that maybe it's one of the when we talk about additional revenues, there's probably a possibility that we may be in a position where we might want to sell the Willits Justice Facility to the city of Willits. It probably they're looking for an expansion of their administrative facilities, and it's right there, so it probably makes good sense. So I think there are opportunities. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. I think we do have some opportunities for additional revenues, and so I want those to be an option.
And
Not just automatic to say, well, if you get an additional revenue, we're going to put it into debt reduction. That's the reason I brought that up.
Thank you.
And maybe it'd be helpful if I just kind of went through all of these, because they're not going to function individually. It's kind of like this is an overall approach, and then you'll see the results of that as the proposed budget and get a chance to comment on that at that time. So anyway, I'll just kind of keep going through, and then if you want to comment on them, you can. So the next guideline that we would be using is to explore potential impacts of 10% cut in net county costs. And those words are used advisedly. Explore, potential impacts. It does end up being a discussion with each department, but it's certainly a discussion that gives you a place to start from, and in some cases, it's a rather short discussion. But you know, in other places, you think, okay, well, if we better estimate salary savings or some other things and get at some of the issues you've talked about in terms of where we can streamline. So that's just a kind of reference point for that discussion. Moving on to number 4, using fees to recoup operational expenses whenever possible. Again, the positioning of the fee hearings will give us a chance to kind of put that discussion in the midst of the budget discussion. When operating costs go up, at some level that needs to be reflected in fees as appropriate. This is another one that may be controversial. Do not consider funding for other agencies or new projects at this time. And that kind of goes back up to the philosophical statement of not setting new priorities in this budget. Again, there are going to be people asking, and there's going to be pressure to address those. But we're saying in the proposed budget, we're going into it thinking we've got to make sure that we take care of the county and the county's priorities and responsibilities. Number 6 is new priorities for the proposed budget need majority vote of the board. In other words, just the way you would give us direction that you want something included would be to provide that direction as a group, and we will respond. Utilize attrition where possible and reductions in force where necessary. That speaks to, one of the largest expenditures in the county is for staff, and we need to be mindful of that. Attrition has managed to work the last several times, so that is obviously the first priority if you need to reduce the levels of staffing. The last 4 budget guidelines then are focused on streamlining procedures and permanent fixes, not just temporary fixes. So that's one reason why you don't see the use of the term furloughs. It's not particularly popular among staff. Previous direction from the board was it's not popular among the board, and it certainly is a temporary thing. Okay. Build reserves to the goal levels, and again, that has to be prioritized with everything else, but that is a goal that we've got. Review all current and proposed budget policies and special funds. There are a number of special funds that have been identified and talked about, and there are also some policies around replacement funds and those kinds of things. And it's our intention over the next couple of months before the May workshop that we will be reviewing all of those policies and special funds and be able to recommend any changes to those or the way they would fit into the budget process. And then finally, incorporate development and funding of major maintenance projects and capital improvement plan into the budget process. You might have noticed those discussions, particularly the capital improvement plan, kind of happened outside of the budget process. And it needs to be brought in so that whatever is prioritized is reflected in the proposed budget up front, rather than, discussing it kind of after the fact. So those are the guidelines, and I think the discussion you've already had on these is really useful and illuminating. And if you want to provide further direction on that, you'll have another opportunity on April 1st to look at this, and in May you would see the results of where we're headed with the proposed budget. So you want me to keep going here? Okay.
Yep. Speed read.
Speed reading. Okay. So there are 2 aspects then. Those are the guidelines as we put together the budget. Then there are 2 aspects: budget trimming and restructuring as one way of reducing expenditures, and then the issue of revenue enhancements. So in the areas of budget trimming and restructuring, again, one of the, and I suppose this could be considered a guideline as well, is departments would be expected to absorb state cuts and the MOU wage increases within their budgets. Again, it's a way of starting that discussion in the budget conferences, and it will have a bigger impact on smaller departments than it does on larger departments from the standpoint of the percentage impact on their budgets, and we're aware of that. The other is considering efficiencies in the courthouse transfer process. Ben Stow, the court executive officer, indicated that I could share, that the judges had indicated that it was appropriate to share the discussions he and I have had regarding, we're in the midst of the transfer process. We've completed Fort Bragg, as far as we know, right? So
it's 99% complete, and once the legislation is finalized, then we'll bring it to the board for your review and consideration.
Yeah. So the negotiations around that, and it has to do with the use of the building and of a court facility payment, et cetera. We're now moving on to Willits and Ukiah. Well, in the Willits discussion, the Administrative Office of the Courts has indicated their intention ultimately to close the Willits court operations and to consolidate